Okay, so I just want to start by saying a big hello from the Mangrove Action Project and welcome to our first YouTube live session. The Mangrove Photography Awards is about to start its 7th year, and we want to encourage absolutely everyone, wherever you are, to get involved and to take part, to celebrate and showcase the diversity of life in our mangrove forests. It's also an opportunity for people to raise their voices for the protection of one of our most undervalued and critical ecosystems on the planet. Your photos and stories have the power to inspire conservation action and restoration. The awards opens for submissions in a few days on the 5th of June with 6 categories: wildlife, landscape, people, underwater, threats, and a youth awards to engage the younger generation. Check out the link in the description and comments. And we're also excited to be joined this year by amazing internationally renowned judges and ambassadors. Do pop over any questions you have in the comments and we'll be answering them throughout our session. And today we'll be speaking to 2 of our ambassadors, wildlife photographer Dhritiman Mukherjee and conservation photographer Octavio Aburto, and also Roshni Ladir, who's a grassroots photographer who entered some great images last year. But before that, I wanted to introduce you to Laura Mickey, our comms manager, and Alfredo Cuarto, MAP's co-founder, who started it all off back in the early 90s when he was photographing as a journalist in Southeast Asia.
Hi everyone. So we're just going to ask Alfredo a few questions to tell you a bit about mangroves and a bit about Mangrove Action Project and how photography can be used to enhance conservation. So just to start off, Alfredo, can you tell us a bit about mangroves and why they're so important?
Well, you know, when I first started working with mangroves, I knew nothing about them. I just happened to be doing a photojournalist type of experience in Thailand, trying to do my first article for Cultural Survival Quarterly magazine. And I went down to southern Thailand with Ian Baird, who was working at that time with Earth Island Institute on the tuna dolphin issue. But he told me a really important issue was the mangrove forest loss due to shrimp farming. And I knew nothing about these at all. I knew nothing about mangroves, nothing about shrimp farming. So I traveled down to southern Thailand to the Andaman Sea and visited different coastal villages, fishing villages there at that time, and found out how important the mangroves were by reading about it in newspaper articles about the issue and how important it was to the local communities because of the fish that they gathered from the mangrove areas and the protection the mangroves gave them from hurricanes and so on, and also the food products they got from the mangroves, the fruit and the bark and the medicines they got from the mangroves. I learned this as I went. And then talking to the villagers, I learned also about their problems of loss of mangroves due to the expansion of shrimp farms at that time.
So that time you spent in Thailand was what inspired you to co-found MAP. Can you tell us a bit about that and about how you founded Mangrove Action Project?
Yeah, sure. One of the inspirations I wanted to mention for my starting this was actually from a Thai fisherman himself, a village headman, a young man whose father had been killed by the mafia because he had spoke out against the mangrove loss. And during our conversation, I was taking notes, and Ian was translating for me, and he would translate and I would write down my messy handwriting, trying to take notes for later on use for writing the article. And I remember this fisherman was so adamant about the mangroves being important to his people, but he was speaking kind of in a regular monotone voice about how important they were and losing the mangroves hurting his village. But then all of a sudden his voice changed. And even though I couldn't understand the words directly, I understood something in his inflection. And I asked Ian, what did he say? Whatever he said seems very important, because I knew that he was saying something that I needed to understand. And he said, if there are no mangroves, the sea will have no meaning. It's like having a tree without roots, for the mangroves are the roots of the sea. When he said this, I'm a writer also and a poet, and I found that he said something very poetic and very important for us to understand. And I told Ian, we have to do something about this. We have to do something because this is important.
That's amazing. And I absolutely love that quote from the Thai fisherman about mangroves being the roots of the sea. So carrying on along the photography theme, what part do you think photography can play in helping to protect mangroves?
Like I mentioned, most people don't know what mangroves are. They don't visit a mangrove area. And we need to show the beauty and the importance of mangroves for photography. Images can say so much, like the picture is worth 1,000 words. But we need to ensure those pictures say what we need to say about the mangrove forest. And hopefully photographers can capture some of the secrets of the mangroves. People never visit these places off and on. And it's very important if we can show through photography what these mangroves are, what they're like and why they're important. And you can see that in some of the imagery that we have in the photo contest, some of the beautiful imagery there. And also depict, if we can, through photography, the importance of the mangroves for the local people. I think that's one thing we can really do with the photography is show the benefits of those mangroves for the locals and try to incur basically a sense of ownership for the world population, that these are important ecosystems that need to be protected. We've lost over half the mangrove forest worldwide. That's a problem. I mean, we want to try to restore as much as we can and get away from this loss and reduce the loss to a zero reduction. They're very important for climate change. For instance, they hold more carbon, sequester more carbon and hold it in our soils, the peat soils, for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So this is very important to get out to people that if you want to limit climate change, mitigate the problem, we need to save the mangroves.
So Alfredo, mangroves are still declining at a really fast rate. And I was just wondering, in your opinion, how can we pull together and what are the best approaches to restoring mangroves and protecting them?
That's a very good question. You know, a lot of people are involved in mangrove restoration today. We see evidence of people planting thousands, if not millions, of mangrove seedlings along the coast and claiming this is a victory for the mangroves. But if you go back there in a year or so, a lot of that is washed away or dies because it's in the wrong place, planted at the wrong time with the wrong species. So we really need to be able to try to talk to people about approaching mangrove restoration in a more effective manner. And what we have promoted is the community-based ecological mangrove restoration approach, CBEMR, which basically helps restore the mangroves in a more balanced fashion in a way that's basically ecosystem approach. It works with the mangroves, but also works with the surrounding terrain and surrounding community of other ecosystem benefits like coral reef, seagrasses, mangroves are all tied together, mudflats and so on. What's happening in most of these approaches, we call it the gardening approach, is usually used by people where they just plant by hand in rows, neat rows. And oftentimes they plant the wrong species. They usually use red manglar or red mangrove, which is the Rhizophora. And they plant this in neat rows. But if you go back there, the Rhizophora are planted in mudflats, not in mangrove areas. And so these Rhizophora do not do very well. The red mangrove dies or is unhealthy. And so we need to really be careful how we try to restore mangroves and also work with local communities to educate them on better ways to approach conservation of their forests. And so that's what we're doing now through our community-based ecological mangrove restoration approach, is training people who are practitioners of restoration and proper ways to approach restoration. Otherwise, there's a 75 to 80% failure rate. And this is something we can't accept. If we're really interested in protecting the mangrove areas and restoring them, we should be taking a better approach, what we call the best practice approach, which we think CBEMR is. And so we're doing that now to try to offset this loss of mangroves and help instill in people the proper way of restoring them.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Alfredo, for your inspiring words. And it really does show the power of photography in the world of conservation. And in the same way that your photos was what started Mangrove Action Project, we're really keen to keep making the noise and connecting people emotionally to these really important issues so that action can be taken. So let's hear now from our speakers who we caught up with in the last couple of weeks.
I just want to say a big thank you, Dhritiman, for joining us here today and for our Photography Awards. It's always such a pleasure to hear about your explorations, to view your photography with your humble perspective and true insights into our natural world. I really don't want to take up any more of the time, so I'll let Laura carry on with her questions and hope everyone enjoys.
Thanks, Leo. And again, just to kind of echo what Leo said, thank you so much for chatting to us today. We're really excited to hear about some of your work. And I guess our first question is just, you know, what initially got you into photography and conservation work?
Well, first I want to thank you, you both and your organization for involving me in this great project. And I mean, it's exactly the same thing what I do all the year. So I'm very happy to do this. I started my photography long back, but when I started photography, the conservation thing was not in my mind. It was completely for fun. But slowly I realized that being in the field, working with the nature, it gives me pleasure. Also, I can contribute for the society.
So in terms of the Sundarbans, which is such an incredible place, can you tell us about some of your experiences there, some of the people you've met, and some of the wildlife in the forest?
Oh, Sundarban, I have been working in Sundarban from 2000 actually, precisely 2000. So it is almost 21 years. And when I started working there, initially I was involved in, survey project. That those were not photography project. I was surveying the birds and the habitat and the mangroves. So that gave me a brief, some kind of knowledge about the habitat. And what is amazing about Sundarbans, I mean, people who think about Sundarbans, mostly they think Sundarban is great because of the Royal Bengal tiger. And the tigers in Sundarbans are man-eater, even the crocodiles are man-eater there. So it gives some kind of excitement to the people. But Sundarban is amazing not because of only the tiger, it is because of the habitat, the mangrove it has. It is, I mean, the way Sundarban touches me is the diversity of mangrove. And if you see, and somehow I am very much connected with mangroves because of the ability of adaptation of the species. If you see other plants, if you compare with the mangrove clearly they have some amazing attitude. When you see mangroves in the sea mouth, for example, rhizophora, when you see they're standing with the stilt root and pneumatophores, so they're always fighting with the adversity of nature. So it teaches us a lot of things, and Sundarban has that kind of diversity. And I have seen the inside of the forest, so that gave me immense opportunity to know more about it. Like inside Sundarban, the floor is an amazing place because a lot of things are happening. It's a tidal tidal ecosystem. And if you walk through the forest during that time, you can see a lot of activities are happening, like crabs are out and a lot of crustaceans are out. They are doing a lot of activities on the ground. So when I walked through the forest, I got an opportunity to see all those natural beauty in the forest. And then another thing is I walked with the people there. So if you see the ecosystem of the Sundarbans, there's a huge involvement of the people living around Sundarbans. So they mainly depend on the fishing and some kind of resources from Sundarban, like honey. They collect honey from the forest. I have seen time when there was no fish. I mean, the fishermen used to go for fishing, but they used to come back with no fish.
Wow.
One of the biggest reason was, the people used to collect seedlings of prawns, because of prawn cultures, and they had no idea because they used to use a very dense net, and due to that net, they used to collect a lot of other species and other small fish. Those kind of fishing actually destroyed the ecosystem in one point of time. Then forest department took initiative and we started documenting. We put photos in the social media or to the policymakers to draw the attention that see what is happening, how it is happening. And it was not that was a problem only for from those people. It's a overall. So when we go for a conservation approach, we have to have a holistic approach. You cannot only talk for the nature, you cannot only talk for people. So it is the right approach should be, you have to include both. If you don't include both, it will be absolutely failure, because there is a interdependency. Tiger is just a one part of the ecosystem, but there are several participants in the entire Sundarban ecosystem, and every participant has a different role, and every role is important. So here, this is again, this this photographic talk helps. So when we go for, like me, when I go to Sundarban, I don't look for tiger. I look for the small stuff. I look for which is overlooked by other people. If I can photograph them, and if those things can make a connection with the people, that will be more effective thing. But,
no, it's so nice to hear about your work and about the experiences you've had, and your photography has obviously been used to convey some of these messages. And what do you think the role photographers can play in terms of protecting our natural world?
I think one very interesting point, like how many people in this world are actually connected with the nature. If you notice it very carefully, that is a very niche area. Like some photographers, some nature enthusiasts, they all talk about nature, they see all these things. It's a very, very small number. This is our goal, is to connect the mass, not the people who are already connected.
Yeah,
absolutely. So our goal is to connect the disconnected people. And here, how this photography, why I like this photographic award thing, because this award is not a competition. This is not about that which photographer is better than whom. It is not about that. When we talk about award, so people give full-hearted, involvement, and they bring back a lot of stories from the nature, and they come out to the mass in the name of award, where a lot of new stories actually reach to the people, which build up a huge lobby in favor of the, for example, here the mangrove. But what we look for, I told you, we look for new images, new stories, new visuals. I mean, which is different, which is not seen before. And if you think that what actually gives us pleasure, surprises gives us pleasure. Actually, if you think, and this surprise only comes from knowledge. Knowledge is the only source of our pleasure. Whatever pleasure you can imagine, I will prove it. Whatever pleasure you have in your life, whatever, if you go to the root, it is the knowledge. So when we say now, oh, this photo is wow, fantastic photo, that means what is seen in the photo I have not seen before. It is giving some kind of new knowledge to me, and I get surprised, and then I tell that wow, and then in those cases we tell photographers they are great photographers, because they continuously bringing back new knowledges, new things. The great photographers, what they do actually, they bring back great visuals which are new to us, that actually contributes aesthetically that contributes, scientifically contributes, emotionally those photos contributes. So that way it actually enriches us. So that's why I always prefer to say it is not a competition. So we are all here to contribute. We are not here to compete. You are adding people every day, more people. Why we are trying to spread it? Because we need more people to be in favor of mangrove. Whatever the issue, in this case, this is mangrove. The issue is mangrove. So the more people we will get in favor of mangrove, our job will be easier. Like the restoration or conservation, whatever we do. So that way, this award program is absolutely a contributory program. This is not a competition. Everyone who participates, every photographer who participates in this program is a contributor, is not a competitor.
One question I'd love to ask, so for photographers that may never have photographed mangroves before, and they can be very difficult to photograph, the deep mud and the dense roots and the tidal cycles. Do you have any tips or tricks for best ways to photograph in mangroves?
See, I don't love to talk on how part, like how to take photos. I mean, people know it, but one thing, if you talk about the ethical part, say where we have to take a call that how far we can go or how far not. So this is a very, very important self call, and it depends on your knowledge also. So you have to stop somewhere, or you need to know the priority. So for the ethical part, what I believe, it is, even I don't love to call it ethics. For me, it's a responsibility which comes from the ownership. Like when I feel a ownership for the forest, for the habitat, then only I will have some kind of responsibility that actually guides me that how far I can go.
I hope it's kind of inspired everyone to go and check out and explore them, local mangroves as well, and go and observe and get involved with our not competition, awards.
Yes.
So it's
yes.
it's
photographer's duty is to inspire. Yeah.
Exactly.
Duty is to inspire people. That's it.
Absolutely. And that's exactly it. And it's everyone, it's everyone's story, right? It's your mangrove story. So get involved, and thanks so much, Dhritiman, again.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Octavio, for joining us today for our talk. And just to introduce you, so Octavio is the director of the Gulf of California Marine Program. He's an assistant professor at Scripps Institution of Oceanography and a professional photographer with the International League of Conservation Photographers. His research and photographs are focused on marine reserves and commercially exploited marine species. He's one of our ambassadors again. Thanks for joining us again, Octavio.
Thank you, Leo. Thank you, Laura. And it's a great pleasure to be here.
So I guess to start with, we'd love to hear a bit about, what drew you initially to photography and conservation?
Well, when I was 17 years old, I moved to La Paz in the Baja California Peninsula to study marine biology. And I had the fortune of participating in a laboratory that works with coastal ecosystems and reefs. And I was in charge of using cameras and video cameras to do science. But little by little, I started corrupting myself and get the cameras to take pictures of animals, of seascapes. So I had the opportunity to visit mangrove ecosystems in that region. And since the first time that I snorkel, I dive in one of these mangrove forests, I got amazed by the beauty and the all the things that I saw within all these roots of red mangroves. So since then, I have been taking photographs and doing science about these ecosystems.
Yes. So as a scientist and a researcher, how do you use your photography in your science communication? Well,
after I saw that these images captured the attention of my mom and other friends and families, I realized that images can tell many stories, and especially the stories about the science that I have been doing since then. So, and the nice part about science communication is that we need to write papers, we need to build the narrative in the science, and then you can start combining the narrative with the photography. So in one way or another, images improve 1,000 times the way to communicate with the public.
So in terms of your work in Mexico, could you tell us a bit about your scientific research and your photography that you've done in Mexico?
Yes, my PhD thesis, when I went to do my doctoral program, basically I decided to do it with mangroves. So during that time, I had the opportunity to visit almost all the mangroves in the Gulf of California. That is this internal sea that Mexico has, and it's a great place. It's one of the most impressive seas in the planet. Jacques Cousteau used to call it the aquarium of the world, and I think is really that. So I visited many of these forests. I collected samples. I do a lot of studies, but also capture the different mangroves and transitions that you can see in these regions, from mangroves that are in contact, direct in contact with the deserts, not only cacti, also sand dunes, all the way to these mangrove swamps, mangrove forests that are very related with tropical jungles. So you can see the gradients, and you can see the biodiversity that is changing, and how these mangrove forests interact with other ecosystems. Mexico is the country that occupies the fourth place in the whole world with more mangroves, and we have mangroves in the Northwest, but also in the Pacific area, in the Mexican Caribbean, and in the Gulf of Mexico. And each of these regions have their unique beauty. So if you go to, once I studied the Northwest Mexico, I moved to the Mexican Pacific, and I visited this big mangrove forest that has the highest mangroves in Mexico. It's the same species that you can see in the Northwest Mexico, the red mangrove. In the desert areas, these species can grow up to 2 or 3 meters. In the tropics, in the Pacific, like for example, La Encrucijada in Chiapas, the same species can reach 40 meters high.
Wow.
Tall. So it's really a completely different world. And you can see in these forests crocodiles and ant eaters and raccoons and many other species that really represent incredible ecosystems. But then if you jump to the Yucatan Peninsula, you see again the small mangrove trees, because it's they don't have the same freshwater inputs like in Chiapas or Oaxaca. But the diversity of the Caribbean, you can see it very you can see it in the clear waters and all the different fauna and flora that you can explore and discover in that areas. And also trying to help in the conservation of these areas, because each of these regions have a different drivers that are impacting in a very negative way the mangroves areas. For example, in Chiapas and Oaxaca in the Pacific, the palm agriculture is the one that is reducing the mangrove forest. In the Northwest Mexico, the shrimp farming. In the Caribbean, the tourism industry. And in the Gulf of Mexico, the oil industry is the one that is impacting very negatively these mangrove areas. So each region has their own flavors, not only in biodiversity, also in the drivers that are causing all these problems.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. And so in terms of mangrove conservation in Mexico, what role do you think photography can play in that?
Well, I think that photography is very important to help fighting against these drivers. If there are more people capturing these images and basically sharing what is happening in each of these regions, in each of these mangrove forests, we can make more actions. First of all, there will be more people aware about these impacts. Also, with images, with videos, we can appeal, we can bring more people to fight against the disappearance of mangrove forests. And more importantly, with these images, we can push the government and organizations to take more responsibilities to stop these negative effects, especially stop industries that are generating all these problems. Like, for example, the mangrove photography contest last year, there was this winning image from Mexico in the state of Nayarit, an image of a jaguar with the baby, and it's one of the remaining sites in Mexico where you still can see the jaguars in these ecosystems. So it's very, very important that we protect not only the species, in this case, the jaguar, that is one of the endangered species and protected in Mexico. If we don't protect the whole ecosystem, basically, we never will be successful protecting the species. So I think if there is more people taking images and sharing them with more people, I think it will be very helpful to stop deforestation of mangroves.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some really powerful words. I think that you're right. The more people that can show us these incredible and beautiful environments, the more people will actually want to act to protect them. And so I think our final question is probably, mangroves can be incredibly tricky to take pictures in. Do you have any tips on how best to take pictures there, but also how you can minimize your impact on the environment and the people and the wildlife?
I have been changing especially my fins and all the gear that I use. For example, my fins now are the ones that are very small. I don't bring anymore my big fins, so I try to don't remove the sediment. But also, in mangroves are so shallow that I think the momentum that you can capture during the sunrise and the sunsets are the same like in the terrestrial areas. So starting snorkeling before the sunrise, for example, it's amazing. It's when you can capture how the rays of the sun penetrates the roots of the red mangrove, and it's when you see a seascape, an incredible scenario or a stage where there are different actors like fish or anemones or even sea lions. I have had the opportunity to photograph sea lions inside mangroves, and I think that moment of the day, it's incredible to take images that capture the beauty of these ecosystems.
Wow, you've definitely made me want to go back to Mexico and go and find some mangroves. Do you have any other questions, Leo?
I think, I think that was amazing, Octavio. And I think for now, we'll say goodbye, and really looking forward to receiving, a lot of photos from Mexico, spotlighting these special regions and also highlighting, some of the issues as well. So look forward to working with you and receiving lots of images from Mexico. So I'm just going to introduce you to all our viewers. So Roshni is a conservation photographer based in Tanzania, taking photos of the cultures and people at grassroots level. well as the wildlife. She was a runner-up in the conservation category for her wonderful photos last year from Pate Island. Did I pronounce
Correct.
that?
Yes, Pate Island. Right.
Okay, cool. So I'll let Laura ask some questions, and let's give it a go.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Roshni. I think to begin with, your pictures that you submitted last year to our photography contest were so lovely, and they really showed the people that are working to protect mangroves. And I guess, could you just tell us a little bit about the photos that you took and the people that you met out in Kenya?
Sure. So it was a 1-week assignment in Kenya, the coastal area of Kenya. The area is called Lamu, but particularly off the coast of Kenya, there's an island called Lamu, and then there's Pate Island, which has mangroves, lots of mangroves. And in fact, the statistic that I got is 60% of all mangrove cover in Kenya is in the Lamu region. So
wow,
that's quite significant, of which the other stat that I was given is that approximately 30% of that is degraded. Many different reasons, climate change, pollution, development, illegal logging. And so part of the assignment was to capture the mangrove restoration project and how the women of the community were leading it. So we followed the women, how, the women were the leaders of it. They're the ones growing the seedlings, learning about the different types of seedlings. And then, and it's actually not very far from their village. It's a walking distance from their village. The whole point is involving the community in the restoration part of the project, right? So actually what we were doing at that time is we were following the Pate Island Rangers, and they patrol. So they patrol around the island for illegal activities. And so we entered an area which was mangrove heavy, and we happened to come across the crab fishermen. And they live out here up to 4 weeks. So it's just collecting large crabs in this intricate mangrove ecosystem for 3 to 4 weeks. And this is supporting their family. And so I was just so, and the other thing is how excited they were to the particular fisherman that I was following. He just was so excited, so proud. He literally, and so I speak Swahili, but he spoke English. So he literally would respond like, I can speak English, and I've been a crab farmer since 1978. I think that's what he said. Yeah, and he just proceeded to tell his story about how, since 1958, he's been in this area, a crab farmer, and the crabs are this huge. They're like incredible. And over the years, he's seen so much illegal mangrove logging that in the last 10 years, he said that it was really hard to get actually those big. They kind of had disappeared. He wasn't getting as many. They would have to stay longer sections out there to get the larger crabs. So without the Nature Conservancy helping out, and without NRT, which is their partner organization, patrolling the area for illegal logging, I think that it would have been much harder to continue his living as a crab fisherman.
So were you in Kenya anyway, or is that what is photographing that what drew you to Kenya?
No, so I'm based in Tanzania. I'm Tanzanian. I grew up here in Tanzania. I was born in Kenya. I love East Africa. And so a lot of my work is based in East Africa. A lot of my conservation work is based in East Africa.
Yeah, that's great. So what initially drew you to photography and conservation? How long have you been doing it?
I've been doing photography since 2015. Long story short, I grew up in Tanzania, believing that this was not the right place for me. So I left to the US and I studied there and worked in finance. thinking, yeah, that's the way forward. And then when I was around 27, I just felt that I was living in New York City at the time, and I felt that I wasn't making an impact in the community that I grew up in. And that, yeah, I just felt that I was missing a lot of the virtues that I'd grown up with, like being thankful, being grateful, giving back to the community. So I quit drastically, it was very dramatic, and moved back to Tanzania. So I live in Arusha, where a lot of conservation organizations are based. And so I started off just small because it was something that I just loved, and connecting with the communities. I mean, that's truly what I love, because you're out there, you live with them, you stay with them, you connect with them. And it was such a different life to my suit life in New York City. And so, yeah, that's how I started, and I love it. And I think that to me, it's the impact that I can bring to my community, and the issues that I hold, that have that I think that need to be told, the stories that need to be told.
And that drastic change is brilliant, and that you kind of felt drawn back to your roots, and that's kind of how your photography journey began. Thank you. Yeah, it was really drastic. And actually, working in finance, there's a certain amount of money that you're used to. And so that had become my identity. And so to reshuffle your whole mindset to say, wait, money isn't everything, comfort isn't everything, and starting from the grassroots level, because I just had one camera and one lens, and just being like, all right, will I actually make an earning out of this? Can I tell people stories? And it's not, I chose not to do wedding photography, for example. Like for me, the impact is being with the communities, being able to share their story in a genuine way, where it's not about me, but turn the camera around and what is it about them? I sometimes truly struggle with the selfie culture, because let's turn the camera around and tell their stories,
These kind of, the indigenous people, and it's really interesting, actually. It just made me think, the people who are, living in the mangroves, could they be sort of taking the photos? And it would be so wonderful, right, to get them to really show their world through their eyes.
Yes. Because the thing is, yes, actually, every time I enter a project, I'm like, I love to teach, guys. Let's teach. Like, you don't need a fancy DSLR. You just need a good phone. And a lot of the times I'm there, we as professional photographers are there for only 1 week, 3-4 days. These guys are living, breathing that life. And so they see far more than we do. And so, yeah, I think those are the connections that I make that I follow up with, because it's really these women that, even in the mangrove restoration world, I thought that it's really just the women leading it. It's really women and girls that I've seen are in the last few years are really paving the way to conservation, And they don't see it as conservation, by the way. They're not using the word conservation. For them, it's hey, a healthier mangrove ecosystem means more crabs for us, means we can sell them at a better price, means we can educate our children. So, yeah. It's a way of life, I simplified it, but yeah, you understand. Yeah. Oh no, that's so great. Yeah, thank you so much. Do you have any other questions, Leo?
And I just want to say a big thank you, Roshni. I think that was really cool.
Karibu sana, welcome. Yeah, no, and thanks for inviting me.
I hope you enjoyed listening to all our speakers. A big thank you to them, and thank you for joining us. We just want to say and invite every single one of you once again to take part in the awards this year. Even if you're not in a mangrove nation, there's other ways that you can get involved. Check out the Mangrove Photography Awards website, giving us a fascinating insight into the world of mangroves from all over the earth. Look forward to seeing your mangrove images and mangrove stories. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much
Thank
for
you.
coming.
See you.